The Legend of Zelda needs no introduction. Out of most of the gaming properties in the world, it's one of the few to have such worldwide acclaim. Its games, for the most part, are regarded as either timeless masterpieces or just amazing games in general. Just go on YouTube and I'm sure you'll be able to find at least several videos on Ocarina of Time. With such a long line of games, it's easy to forget about the existence of their select few. And among these few, there's one game in particular that grabbed my attention recently. The Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap is one of the titles developed for the Game Boy Advance, not counting the re-releases. While Four Swords was a multiplayer-centric game, the Minish Cap is a tried and true single-player adventure from beginning to end. Interestingly, the game was developed by Capcom of all companies. Unfortunately, I haven't found much concrete evidence as to how this happened in the first place, so I'm just gonna chalk it up to outsourcing and ordeal. Now, as a kid, I've seen this game everywhere from gaming magazines and demo machines at Best Buy. I barely remembered this title even existed today. It was only recently that I'd received the recommendation to try this game out. Considering I've never played this game before, I took it upon myself to record the entire playthrough. Before playing, my expectations were that this game was just alright and didn't really merit that much discussion. So, is it alright? Or is it just overshadowed by the more successful titles? I'll let you be the judge of that by the end. Long ago, the land of Hyrule was under threat by evil spirits. Just as all hope seems lost, the race of little people known as Picori gifted a brave human the Light Force and the Picori Blade. With it, the hero of men fought off the demons and restored peace to the world. With eternal gratitude, the people would host an annual celebration in their honor. They would host a sword fighting competition to earn the honor of touching that great weapon. You are Link, who just got out of their bed like it was Saturday. Grandpa here asked him to deliver a sword which will be presented to this year's champion. Together with Princess Zelda, you go and enjoy the festivities. During that festival, Zelda is able to win a prize which happens to be your new trusty shield. After that, they head up only to be met with a business scrub shooting them nuts. It's our shield, we're able to reflect it right back. Finally arriving at the castle, we give the blade away and watch as it's presented to the champion of the sword fighting competition, Vaati. As you no doubt had guessed, he's evil and breaks open this chest which contains evil spirits. Fortunately, it didn't contain what he wanted, which was the Life Force. He then turns to Zelda, the stone, and dips. So now you, Link, need to seek out the Picori and restore the blade to its former self. To do this, you'll need to head to the Minish Forest and locate the Picori people who are said to only show themselves to children. With that, the game fully opens up to you. To all the young gamers of the world, no, this isn't an open world RPG. I'm sorry to say, but this is a linear experience. Yes, scary, I understand, but don't worry. Allow me to ease you in. There's an appeal to open world games. The ability to pick and choose where you go. Breath of the Wild came out as an extremely successful and influential launch title for the Switch. For the past few decades, open world games have been an industry standard if someone wanted to make money. Unfortunately, this also came at the cost of many companies pushing out mediocre products for quick profit. Nowadays, we live in a perpetual cycle of potential hype on the next Skyrim, hoping that the magic and amazement we once had could manifest again. Then, when filled with utter disappointment, we take the Nexus mods in order to do the job of the company for them. Now, tangent aside, I bring this up because if you were looking for something such as A Link to the Past, then you will be sorely disappointed. From start to finish, your destination is always set in stone. Before any of you say anything, I would like to point out that, yes, a linear experience is a perfectly normal gaming experience, but consider our current gaming year. It's easy to make games with so much content splashed in that you have to decide what you want to do first. There's so much decision making that can end up being decision paralysis instead. Having this streamlined experience makes for an enjoyable time on its own. The game's controls are pretty tight, nothing feels slippery or too sensitive. Even while using a gamepad, I found it a pretty comfortable experience. Rolling will be your best movement for traversing early on. Did I also mention how good it feels to whack these things in the face? Now, arriving at the Minish Forest, we run into a talking hat being harassed by the locals. Saving its life, it introduces itself as Eslo, with similar interest in stopping Vaati. The two team up as he hitches a ride on our head. This is the Navi of our game. He'll be with us for the entire journey and can be called upon with a select button in case you forgot your objective. With the power of Cap, Link is able to access portions of the game that he normally can't by turning small. Normally, he isn't able to do much but move. However, it's when he accesses the mini sections of the game where he's able to play as normal. In my honest opinion, I think it's a neat little mechanic. It's nothing revolutionary, but it aids in creating some fun level design. Arriving in the Minish village, we speak with Vistari, who has to swallow a nut to understand the Minish language. From there, we can speak with the Elder, who explains that we need the 4 elements in order to restore the Picori blade to its former power. Continuing from the side of the Elder's house, we arrive at our first dungeon, Deepwood Shrine. Since it's the first, the dungeon isn't too complex. we need to reach the boss room by gathering keys to unlock our way through. Our first real example of the fun of this shrinking mechanic comes in the form of this barrel. If we were normal size, such a design would feel rather out of place, but because it's the Minish people who built this place, it's very much in line with their architecture. Since this place is only accessible while mini, the place takes accommodations to reflect that it was built by the Picori. After a bit of navigation, we encounter our first mini-boss, the Matter Pillar. In order to hit the boss, you'll first need to hit its big red nose, which will then reveal its real weak point, a heart-shaped tail. You'll need to rinse and repeat, while also avoiding its rather erratic zigzag pattern. Overall, nothing too crazy, but it can easily get you if it's your first time. Defeating it grants Link the Gust Jar, one of many items which will prove essential in his quest. With the power of suction, Link can suck up air and shoot it back out. If you notice on specific objects in the dungeon, it's made clear what it's for, but there's more to it than groundskeeping. Certain enemies are made vulnerable after using the item. As such, you're always going to use this at one point or another. After a bit of further dungeon delving, we finally reach the first boss, the Big Green Choo Choo. With this boss, we'll start a trend that will precede every other. You'll need to use the Gust Jar in order to start sucking up its foot. Once you do this enough, its head will start to sway back and forth. Be mindful where it lands and then swing away. After that, you'll get the Earth element and the heart container. Alright, so in each dungeon, you'll be able to collect heart containers in order to increase your maximum health. So be sure to be on the lookout for these. All in all, Deepwood Shrine is a perfect introduction to the core gameplay loop and helps break in what to expect. After attaining that, the next destination is the flame element located in Mount Krenal. Before we do that, however, we're quickly introduced to the series' other mechanic, the Kinstones. Scattered across Hyrule are one half of a stone, which you can join together with other corresponding NPCs that have the matching piece. When you connect them together, you'll receive a new addition to the overworld. This could range from rupees to upgrades such as heart containers. It's a good distraction to take on in between dungeons. Zelda games have always been known for uncovering secrets, so it doesn't hurt to go out of your way to find a few. Only a few specific ones are needed to progress through the game, so don't worry too much about it. Personally, I find that they're a fun little addition to this small handheld game. It's like a little treasure hunt, trying to figure out where the other half is. Once you unlock it, you can always check back on your map to see where you can find it. This series has always been about a sense of adventure and discovery, so these Kinstones are a nice way to pad the game out with extra content. Now, before we're able to make our way over, we'd head towards the dojo and meet with Swiftblade. The game contains several dojos, which will grant you new abilities to use with your sword. In the case of Swiftblade, it'll be 4 skills as you progress through the game. I didn't learn until much later that there were additional dungeons that you can find in the game as well, which helps further cement the amount of content you'll be able to find in this game. You'll teach Link the ability to use the spin attack. This is necessary because you'll need it to demonstrate to the guard that you're capable of traversing through the mountain. Not really sure what spinning has to do with it, but alright. From there, we make our way towards Mount Krenal. In this portion of the game, we unlock the bomb, which will allow us to punch holes into inconspicuous walls. From there, we'll also unlock the bottle, which will allow us to store water. Water which will cause the seedling to undergo immediate photosynthesis and allow us to climb. Getting to the top, we'll have you navigate through a few caves as well as gliding through some whirlwinds. For the most part, the climbing portion is fine, nothing too stand out. But I wasn't a huge fan of the wall climbing section. It wouldn't be too much of a problem if the boy's climbing speed was adequate. Still, the game's difficulty is on the mostly fair side. Once we make our way to the top, we shrink down and meet the Picori within the Melari mines. Meeting the smith Melari and his apprentices, he takes on repairing the Picori blade while we go obtain the flame element. And so we enter into the Cave of Flames, the second dungeon of the game. Given that it used to be a mine, there are mine carts scattered throughout the area. Riding them is the only means of traversing through specific blue doors. I almost forgot to mention though about these silly little mushrooms. You'll need to hold and drag them all the way back to rocket yourself across some gaps. It's not much, but I thought it was kinda neat. What's more neat is the continuation of using the Gust Jar. I'm sure the Zelda series does this often, but I'm a huge fan of always continually using new powers and abilities with each progression. From here, we face our next mini-boss, the Spiny Choo Choos. The name of the game is that they shoot out thorns whenever you get close. Giving them a good whack when you can will work, but you could also use bombs as well. As long as you don't get overwhelmed, it's another win. And so we gain our next new item, the Cane Apache. With this, we gain the ability to flip certain objects upside down. This can also be used to reveal Minish portals and other secrets. It's also what we'll need to traverse through some rather spiky platforms. We also use this on certain pits in order to create trampolines. Going further in, we'll also have to deal with some platforming sections using our new cane. Nothing invigorating, but I'll take that. Admittedly, I was caught off guard several times by this particular section here with the pots. It can be a little tricky to get right, but not unbearable. After that, we get ourselves the boss room key and come face to face with the boss. Gleerock's main weak point is his shell. You'll need to aim the cane towards it in order to get it to flip upside down, causing it to be in its vulnerable state. After that, it'll refresh and you'll have to avoid a barrage of fire. Try to be careful, cause if you take damage, Link automatically moves depending on which direction he's facing in, and sometimes you might land in the lava if you aren't careful. Compared to before, this is definitely a step up, as you have to be both on the move and ensuring you can hit its shell. As a plus, you can get rid of the fire to reveal some possible health pickups. Once we beat, we're privy to the flame element and another heart container. If you've been scouring these dungeons, you should be getting a heart throughout each level. With that done, we return back to Malari and retrieve our sword, which is now the white sword. It's explained that with each element infused into it, the sword grows in power. To obtain this newfound power, we're gonna need to head back to Hyrule Castle, but not before going back to good old Swiftblade and learning the Rock Breaker, letting you break pots and throwable rocks with just the sword. After some digging around, we're able to locate the secret room in the garden. Inside, we're able to upgrade the white sword with both elements. While charging up the spin attack on specific tiles, Link is able to create a temporary clone of himself who repeats whatever he does. This will be needed to complete certain puzzles and access new secrets. Upon entering the North Hyrule Fields, we find Vati who ambushes us, seemingly knowing Eslo. After defeating some enemies, our hat apologizes and explains that Vati was a Picori who was his apprentice. One day, Vati wore a red cap which Eslo made for the humans. Drawn by humanity's wickedness, he sought to wear it himself, which had the ability to grant wishes. Thanks to it, he was granted a new form and cursed the great sage into a lowly hat. That in hand, we set out towards dungeon number 3, though not without witnessing some rather suspicious behavior from the king. In any case, we arrive towards Castor Wilds, where we're instantly barred from progressing. To traverse through the swamp, we're gonna need to go fast. I admit, it took me quite a bit to think about before I learned that I had to go to the shoe shop. Once there, we find the owner being pretty sleepy. Drinking down, we get told by some Minish that a special mushroom can revitalize him. We head off towards the designated place and get the mushroom. Do note that you can also store a special potion in your bottle for some rupees which will restore your health. Either way, we get back and finally obtain the Pegasus boots. With these, we're able to start dashing and traversing the overworld at a much faster pace. But that's not all. Back at the dojo, we can earn the ability to also make a dashing sword attack. After that, we do some more side activities, including locating a few of the other dojos I mentioned. Here, we learn the rolling slash attack. Once run, we're off to the Castor Wilds proper. The name of the game here is traversing through swampland. We're also introduced to some snakes, which can be dispatched with some ease. We find another business scrub who is willing to sell us some arrows for a bow, which we don't have yet. After some navigating, we run into a dark nut. These will try and block your attacks wherever they can. Striking them from behind usually does the job. You can also use your bombs to inflict damage on them too. Once done, we acquire the bow, which gives us a ranged attack option, along with 30 arrows. We'll be using this to gouge Igor statues, which will try and chase after you once you attack them. Then, we acquired special golden kinstones, which are needed to progress through the area. You'll perform the fusion with these 3 statues, which will break open the rock. Now, we can enter the Fortress of the Winds. It's here that the dungeons are becoming just a tad more complex than before. Nothing earth-shattering, but it's certainly a step up from before. The first area just involves us getting past these Armo statues. This is where the shrinking mechanic really starts to shine. Some statues won't attack and block your progress, so you'll need to shrink and climb into them to pull the lever. You don't think twice about it, but it helps add to the variety of level design. Inside, we'll need to navigate through numerous entrances, gathering keys to progress, and it's also here that we acquire the moments, which will allow us to dig through the sand. This place has given me a bit of stress, admittedly, not because it's hard, but because of this bridge that quickly disappears unless you're able to time and run across it, as well as these master hands known as floor masters. If they even touch you, you're sent back to the entrance. They aren't even hard to take care of, but I just really had one of those moments. Either way, we make it towards the boss Mazal. The objective is to shoot an arrow into the spheres on its hands, which you can then whack with your sword. After that, it'll be vulnerable and you'll have to shrink down to strike at certain pillars. This is the first fight where the shrinking mechanic is involved, and I think it's implemented really well. So I would like to preface this by saying that I was struggling at the beginning. I thought I had to strike at the eyes with my bow, but if you take long enough, they'll also start spawning minis that'll prevent you from attacking. Until I realized this, I was pretty stressed. It's probably my fault for the skill issue, but I don't know. Once done, we get ourselves under the heart container and we're out. It's here we find that the element of wind isn't here and that we'll need to head to the sky. But we do acquire the Ocarina of Wind. Even in the Game Boy game and a different universe, we cannot escape this thing. With this, we've unlocked fast travel, able to go to any of these wind marked locations at any time. Since we don't have the means of flight, our next objective is the water element. With our new ocarina, we warp ourselves in Lake Hylia and discover that an elder library knows how to enter the Temple of Droplets. We make haste to the library only to discover that some books are missing from the shelf. Without it, no Picori can visit him. Speaking with the front desk reveals that books were long overdue. I guess there's no fine here. In any case, each book was checked out by different people, so our time is spent doing their job. After quite a bit of time, we're finally done. We also receive the power bracelets, which allows us to push heavier objects as a Picori. Speaking with the elder, we let him know that we want to head to the temple, and just like that, he opens a secret hatch and we're sent to a new area. It's here that we acquire our next new item, the flippers. This will finally allow us to swim, opening up even more pathways for secret collecting if you're going for that. We'll also be needing it to access the 4th dungeon. Once out, I decide to do a bit more side questing and collect some goodies. I finally purchased a boomerang from the shop, which lets me stun enemies on hit. Extremely useful, and I recommend getting it early if you can. Finding Tingle and his brothers awards me the magical boomerang, which really isn't much. It just lets me control the boomerang. Not too bad though. A few heart containers, and we also receive the ability to charge up the sword gauge faster. It's mid, but better to charge faster than slower. We also learn the ability to shoot out the sword beam just like in the original Zelda, except it can only be done at 1 heart. You most likely won't be using this often. Finally, we reach upon the Temple of Droplets. We've chanced upon the ice level of the game. You'll encounter mostly slippery floors and plenty of swimming. The dungeon is filled with a few ice block puzzles where you need to melt the keys encased in ice. If you're using a guide, it's not too bad. It's a decent dungeon and it shouldn't be too rough either. So navigating through ice can still be a pain, so caution is needed. Ice levels tend to be the least popular in games, so I'm glad to see that it's not befalling the same fate here. I do enjoy the little gimmick of needing to melt the ice in order to get the keys though, as well as setting in ice blocks to make the pathway clear. Our mini boss this time is a blue choo-choo. It's no different than the green one, except it has electricity. Very scary. Do the same thing you've done before, though this time you have to wait until it's not sparkling up to suck it up. After that, you'll be awarded with the Flame Lantern, giving us the ability to light up dark rooms and melt ice. This time we now get to utilize our new flippers as well as using our good old Gust Jar to manipulate a lily pad. Though if I could just say one thing, I do wish there was an easier way to switch equipment other than the menu, but that's just small potatoes. Our main objective now is to melt the water element encased with ice by shining the sun through both sides of the room. After several rooms of problem solving, we eventually melt the ice. Unfortunately, it also melted the Octo Rock as well, which decided to suck up the element. So now we follow Chase and take on the Force Boss. The boss takes up a good chunk of space and will try to hit you with boulders or just suck you in. Just reflect the boulders back with a sword attack. After that, it's gonna freeze up, so you'll need to quickly burn its tail with the lantern. Rinse and repeat until it's done. With that, we finally get the water element and we only need one more. Upon exiting out of the dungeon, we're soon greeted by a ghost named Gustav. He tells us that he's a former king of Hyrule and will mark a location on our map. Before we head there, we'll need to go back to the castle and infuse the water element into our sword. Along the way, I use our newly acquired lantern to light the dojo hidden in the garden. With that, we learn the sword beam, which lets us shoot out projectiles at full health just like the original Zelda. Now, along the way, we need to sneak past the guards who are now patrolling the area. Just be a little patient and you should be fine, though I did get scuffed a few times. Anyway, we arrived at Sanctuary and can now make 2 copies of ourselves. Before heading off, I decided to do a few more Kinstone fusions. I received the ability to use remote bombs, switching back and forth with regular bombs. These can be detonated on command instead of a timer. It's nice, but you'll never see me use them in this playthrough. We also obtained a big bomb bag, which nets us now carry 99 bombs. A bit overkill, but it is what it is. At long last, we finally depart towards the Royal Valley. It's here that we have to fight some ghosts and crows, but more importantly, we discover a great fairy fountain. Get all the questions right and you'll upgrade your quiver to hold 99 arrows. This game really loves letting us hold a lot of things, doesn't it? Either way, we continue until we reach the haunted forest. You'll need to head in specific directions to make it past. If you read the signs, you'll know where to go. Once we do, we make our way towards a home owned by someone named Damp, who gives us the graveyard key. Though just as we're about to use it, we get robbed by a crow. With our Pegasus boots, we knock the key off and head on in. Before we enter the crypt, we do acquire some goodies in the graveyard. The Royal Crypt is a relatively short dungeon that makes extensive use of the lantern. This is where the game starts testing your reaction with having to navigate your Link clones across moving platforms. You mess up and your clones are gone. And believe me, it's going to stay like that for the remainder of this game. Overall, the dungeon is comfortable enough sojourn that we make it to the end, no problem. We meet the ghost of King Gustav, who grants us a golden kinstone. After a bit of talking, we're warped back to the Royal Valley. It's here I do a few more goodie huntings with an extensive amount of kinstone fusions. I received 2 joy butterflies from fusing with Neryu and Din. Unfortunately, I was missing a kinstone for Furore. I guess we never truly did deserve a third Oracles game. Moving along, these joy butterflies grant us 2 new benefits. We're now able to swim and shoot arrows much faster. The last one lets us dig faster, so be sure to find us kinstones when you can. It's a great passive buff. We also fuse a kinstone with Grimblade, which opens up a hidden cave in Vale Falls, which we head off to. We meet with Master Splitblade, who teaches us the ability to charge our split gauge much faster. Continuing in Vale Falls, we fuse the golden kinstone to open the stone door. From here, we navigate our way towards the top of the falls. With a massive vortex before us, we enter and parachute our way towards the sky, and so we arrive at Clawtops. It's here that we talk with 2 sisters, Gale and Haley, who explain that they aren't able to get back home without the winds. In order to restore this wind, as well as reach our next destination, we need to generate winds by fusing several golden kinstones. If you aren't a fan of how the gliding feels in this game, you're gonna have to deal with it, as that's primarily the gameplay here. You have to head to each cloud section to locate the golden kinstones. Red tornadoes take you back up, while you also need to fall through the holes to progress. Admittedly, I found this section of the game pretty dull. Not that it was hard or anything, but the amount of gliding along with potential backtracking if you mess up starts to become tedious. Be sure to dig through the snow for some extra goodies. Once that's done, we're able to create another vortex, which lets us head to the Tower of Winds, our next destination. We also unlock another wind crest for Ocarina fast travel. 1 heart container later and we're off to the tower. Be sure to get all the goodies up here as we speak with the Elder. Knowing who we are and what we're doing, she gives us permission to obtain the wind element at the Palace of Winds. Heading to the rooftop, we ride another giant vortex and it's off to dungeon number 5. It's here that we'll need to hit these switches in order to create pathways to advance. You'll be switching between melee and range to get further in. The platforming starts to ramp up as you'll need to start moving across moving floors and avoid falling off. Now is as good as any to really highlight how useful the boomerang is. Stunning anything is the best way to deal with enemies in this game. Since it's optional, it makes sense to unlock it as soon as you can. Defeating these Wizrobes will net us the Rope Cape, which grants us the ability to jump and glide. You can already guess how the dungeon will play out for the remainder. There will be plenty of platforming in this dungeon, but the controls for jumping don't require ultra precise movement. In fact, it's just as good as running around. Though admittedly, I did get stuck on these clouds until I realized I had to jump straight up instead of heading north. Oops. Combined with some giant fans, cane holes, and duplicate puzzles, the palace is definitely some of the best the game has to offer so far. Having numerous combat options, you're free to dispose of the enemies however you like. Whether it's boomerang stuns or bombs, you really do feel like you've come far on this journey. Once we get the boss key, it's time for us to take on the boss, or rather 2 bosses. Beat the red and blue Georg. To harm the red one, you'll need to form the duplicate links and attack all of its eyes at once. Then you'll be able to actually do damage to it. After that, it switches over to the blue one, where you'll need to whack its eye and jump over its tail. Just like any boss, it'll get tougher to do as they start throwing in more projectiles and enemies your way. It's a fun boss fight though, definitely keep you on your toes. Once we defeat it, the wind element is finally ours. With that, we've gathered all 4 of them and we can make our way back to the Hyrule Sanctuary. Before I do, it's time for me to wrap up our last portion of goodie hunting. Going back to Swiftblade, we learn the down thrust, which we pull off by jumping then attacking. Essentially, this is where his down B comes from in Smash. With 7 of these Tiger Scrolls in hand, we're able to acquire the Ace 1 and Caster Wilds. We speak with Swiftblade the first and gain the Great Spin Attack. This is one of the best moves in Link's arsenal bar none. It's extremely useful for getting rid of hordes of enemies and will be exceptional in the final dungeon. Now with all 8 scrolls, you're able to access a hidden skill that you couldn't get otherwise. If you fuse the Kinstone with Waveblade, you'll unlock the waterfall entrance in North Hyrule Field. Inside, we encounter Great Blade, who allows our Great Spin attack to last even longer. With that, we've assembled all the skills you can acquire in this game. From here, I gather up a few more heart containers and complete the Goron side quest to earn my 4th bottle. Now, there are a few heart containers that I just didn't bother getting. Why is that? Figurines. In the Minish Cap, you're able to exchange mysterious shells for these little figures. The more you put in, the higher chance you get something you don't have. You'll need to acquire all 130 figurines in order to unlock a heart container. I do apologize that I'd much rather get to the final dungeon than record an additional hour or two on pulling figurines. Different time period, different gameplay philosophy. Arriving back at Hyrule Castle, we sneak past the guards again and enter the sanctuary. With all 4 elements, we can now create up to 3 duplicate links. Going further in, we walk up towards the stained glass and find out that the light force is within Princess Zelda. This causes Vaati to arrive, revealing that he was waiting for us to do all the work. Now that he knows what he needs to do, he blasts us and disappears. After a bit, we come to, and now it's time to enter the 6th dungeon, Dark Hyrule Castle. It's here that we learn that our charged up Sword Strike can release people from petrification. Where now the dungeon is rather straightforward as we go and free the king who grants us a key. There are also some fake doors, so you need to make sure you use the key on the right one. Eventually, we make it to the entrance where we're free to continue to the second part of the dungeon. But first, let's take a moment to relax for a bit. I gather up some remaining heart tanks and fill my bottles with red potions for what's to come. It's been quite the ride so far. Gathering the items, elements, and skills, we've now come to the final portion of this game. If you're watching up to this point, thank you. It means I'm not boring you to death. I could say the usual spiel about liking and subscribing, but I've already wasted your time enough. So let's do this. Part 2 of the dungeon includes some tile puzzles where we have to make sure every blue tile becomes red. Along with some more duplicate puzzles, this portion will really have you utilizing all of your tools. It's here that I showcase just how great the Great Spin attack really is. I'm just mowing down the enemies like putty. You'll be facing some familiar mini-bosses such as the Dark Nuts and Ball and Chain Soldiers, this time in more quantities. There's a real sense of accomplishment and progression here. With everything you've learned, you're putting it all to the test. Plenty of familiar enemies are here, but you're now well equipped to deal with all of them. Though, there is one bit about this place I don't like. Maybe it's just me, but it brought down the enjoyment just a tad. So there's this one particular section where you need to duplicate yourself and reflect these cannons back at those statues. It sounds simple enough, but you have to make sure you reflect all of them in a short amount of time. And 2 shots come from both directions, meaning you have to time this really quick to get past. Problem is, for whatever reason, I had the most aggravating time making sure the cannons hit their mark, mainly the left side. I can't lie, it sucks tremendously. At least I eventually got it, but let that be a scarring reminder on my playthrough. Once we unlock the boss door, Vaati declares that he's going to attain the light force from Zelda. You'll need to get to the end before a bell chimes 3 times, beat the ball guy, get through a large quantity of Keatons, and defeat a triple Dark Nut spawn. And at long last, we finally reach the petrified Zelda. Though before that, Vaati quickly sends us falling into another room. It's here where we finally fight the man himself. To deal damage, you'll need to destroy the eyes that orbit around him. Then he'll become vulnerable to attack. After that, he'll start to shield his eyes, which you'll need to suck up with the Gust Jar. Just watch out as the eyes will also shoot out beams. Once you beat him, he'll soon enter phase 2, where you'll have to reveal 4 orbs with your arrows. Then you can start whacking them. But you need to make sure all your duplicates also do this as well. The placement of the orbs will change every time he's struck. After all of that, it appears he's been defeated. You use your sword to free Zelda from her curse and attempt to escape. Since the way is blocked, your only way is through the sanctuary. As you do this, Vaati will suddenly impede your progress as you teleport. This is the 3rd and final phase. He'll attempt to shock you with some electrical spheres while also shooting his hands up from below. Using the cane of Pachi, you cause the hand to be flipped, revealing a Minish-sized entrance. You shrink down, enter inside, and defeat an eye with a red pupil. Once you do, exit and repeat. Second time requires a lantern, but overall it's the same. Lastly, you'll need to duplicate yet again in order to reflect 4 spheres back at his eyes. Yes, I did mess up a few times. Yes, it was infuriating because of accuracy. And yes, it was annoying whenever my duplicates disappeared. The key is in the timing. After he throws a few spheres, he'll then do the orb beam. Though make sure to have the duplicate set up beforehand and avoid those attacks. After a few more of that, Link lands the finishing blow and Vaati is finally no more. We return back and make it out. Though they lament on the stay at the castle, Ezlo pops out to state that with the purity of Zelda's heart, the Red Cap's true power can be used. With it, Hyrule Castle is restored to normal and with it, Ezlo's body. And so before he goes on his separate ways, he gives Link one last gift. ever famous hat. With that, The Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap is now complete. So what did I think? It should be evident I enjoyed my time. I enjoyed the sense of progression and hunting of collectibles. The mini mechanic was a neat little inclusion, which gave us a new variety of level design to these dungeons. Since there were only 6 of them, they were designed with as much content and puzzles than with regular titles. Though don't count me much on that. I haven't really played or beaten many Zelda games. Point is, for a handheld title, I thought the game is very much worth someone's time if they were looking for a comfortable Zelda experience. If you want to get into the series, it'd be fine to start here. Over the years, I have been more tuned to roguelikes and RPGs such as Slay the Spire and Baldur's Gate 3, so to just sit down and enjoy this relatively short game was a refresher. All I have to say is thank you again for watching. Based on my poll, my next video will be on Castlevania Circle of the Moon, so I do hope you look forward to it. With that, I bid you farewell, and have yourselves a wonderful day.